Hi, I'm Jess Fields, and welcome to the show. As we kick off this podcast and web show, I want to be clear about something. This show is an open forum for people to bring a perspective and for us to delve into that perspective and find out why they believe what they believe. I don't necessarily agree with everything or maybe with nothing that a guest says, but that doesn't mean that their perspective doesn't need to be heard. News shows used to do that. It used to be possible to have that kind of discussion in America. But now most hosts feel the need to take a side. Well, I think an interview can be valuable without having the host take a side on everything that's expressed by the guest. And that is what this show is intended to do. So when we have a controversial guest on, just be aware I may not agree with everything or anything that's being said. That doesn't mean that that person's view shouldn't be considered or heard or whatever. You're smart enough to make that decision. Today I have a guest that is going to bring a very controversial perspective. It's Pastor Tony Spell, who runs the Life Tabernacle Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Pastor Spell has become notorious in recent days for refusing to comply with the coronavirus shutdown order issued by the Louisiana state government. Governor John Bel Edwards has called out Spell by name, and Spell has been arrested for refusing to comply with the shutdown order. Every Sunday, he estimates that about 1,000 people are coming to his church, and things are proceeding as if nothing was happening in the rest of the world. He's going to have Easter Sunday services just as normal, and he continues to bus people in from outside of the city in different areas, maybe people that don't have transportation. Spell has a very strong perspective that the virus is less of a threat than the religious liberty implications of all the different orders that are coming down from different governments throughout the country. He's assembled a legal defense team, including former Alabama State Judge Roy Moore, and others who are going to take his case all the way to the Supreme Court if he can. He's not worried about getting the virus, and he's not worried about people in his congregation getting the virus. And he believes that in the end he'll be proven right. Well, whether or not you agree with Spell, this is the most comprehensive interview he's given to anyone that we know of. His perspective is interesting, and I hope that you'll enjoy this interview with Pastor Tony Spell. Pastor Tony Spell is the pastor of Life Tabernacle Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he joins me now. Pastor, before we get into any of the hot topic of the day, I want to just briefly ask you about your ministry in your church, because you have a very large congregation, don't you?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jeff, for having us on tonight. And thank you for the opportunity to tell our side of the story. Yes, we have 9,800 people who hold letters in our church. We're a thriving, growing congregation in Baton Rouge, 4 miles from Baton Rouge Airport. We have 19 different nationalities in our congregation. That is a representation of our city, which the church should be a representation of its city, of all spectrums, all nations, kindreds, and tongues. And we're by no means a wealthy congregation. Most of the people that I reach out to in parts of our city do not have transportation, which is why we have such a large bus fleet where we provide transportation.
So Pastor, let me just kind of ask you this. So I noticed on your website you've got this fleet of buses.
Yes.
So on a given Sunday, I guess you send buses out to different parts of the city, and you actually bus people into the church?
That is correct. Not only do I send them, myself and my wife, I drive and she captains, and we average picking up 46 people a week on our one bus. So yes, we do pick people up in a 50-mile radius of our church.
So what number of people do you think come to your church through this busing system where you have them on buses?
On a Sunday morning, just 18 and younger, I average 670 children that I pick up on buses.
Wow.
Younger. That's an average, sometimes larger. sometimes larger numbers than that. So these are children whose only meal they're going to get between Friday public school lunch, Monday public school breakfast is going to be our church that provides them a meal. Everybody that comes through our doors gets a meal for our Sunday school on Sunday morning.
So obviously you have a large congregation that you've built up, and you're reaching out to people that maybe aren't normally coming to church, or they wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to come to church. You're feeding them, and you're putting them on buses, and you're going out into the hedgerows, as Jesus says, I think, in the New Testament. So what is it that, during this crisis, regardless of any of the issues involved, the last few weeks, I mean, have you seen a dramatic decline in the number of people coming to church on Sundays, or has it changed much, or is it basically the same for people?
There's two answers to that. Number one, we've had an increase because our White House correspondent asked us to go outdoors 3 weeks ago because the virus doesn't live outdoors, quote unquote. So we went outdoors, and due to every church being closed in the city, we had 1,800 people come into that service, just parking and worshiping with us. But on the other side of the coin, after my arrest and after threats from the National Guard that they would disband groups of 50, a lot of people who have been incarcerated have been caused to live in fear and torment because of that. So I'm trying to win those people back and let them know that this is the safest place in the city. So it's yes and no. Some people have lost interest in coming because of the fear and the news media that is on our front doorstep 24/7, who are not in our favor. They are not for us. But at the other side of the coin, I had people drive 800 miles to my Sunday morning service from Kentucky. I had people fly in from California. I had people drive in from Minnesota. So it's give and take,
So I think there's been a lot of stories about you in the church, and I think probably the question that hasn't been asked, but it's probably worth asking, what do you hope to achieve with this? What are you trying to send? Are you trying to send a message to folks across the country with this, with continuing to hold services, or is it just kind of like business as usual? Or
what I want to say to every pastor who has closed their doors out of government mandates, what I want to say to you is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator, not your governor, not your mayor, not our law enforcement. We're endowed by our creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Our rights to assemble and worship God like free men do not come from our governor, therefore he cannot take them from us. That's the first thing I want to say to you. So stop living in fear of incarceration. I've already been arrested. It's not a big deal. I was proud to be persecuted for the faith. When that night, when people saw that I'd been arrested, we had a powerful service, a powerful prayer meeting, because people are realizing what's happening in America with socialistic ideologies coming upon us. The second answer to that is, what I hope to accomplish is fulfillment and obedience to the word of God. Hebrews 10:25, do not forsake the assembling together. 2 Timothy 3:15. But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church. Psalm 35:18. I will thank thee in the great congregation. I will praise thee among much people. So there's scriptures that command us to assemble. And there's some things that cannot be accomplished like you and I are doing right now on a screen. And the last hope and beacon of light for our city and our nation is people who can assemble together and worship God in unity, in one mind and in one accord. They've been told that they're non-essential and laid off. They have lost all of their income. They're losing all of their earthly possessions. The small business owners in my congregation Their restaurant doors are closed. 40 years they worked to build these businesses, and they will never again open. That is media terrorism, government terrorism, all because of a false narrative that has not added up yet. We were supposed to be 1.5 million deaths at day 14. We're at day 25, and we're over 11,000. May God have mercy on the souls of the people that are putting this fear into the hearts of Americans.
So when we talk about your congregation, a couple of things come to mind. First of all, how many of them do you think so far have either lost their job or their business, percentage-wise, just rough percentage?
80% of my congregation are either laid off due to being non-essential, or they're mandate. They have no choice. 80%. So if there's 100 people here in this section, only 20 of them have to get up and go to work tomorrow morning.
So I think we lost a little bit of video. I'm going to ask that question again. So Pastor, just a rough percentage, how many people in your congregation do you think have been affected by either losing their jobs or their businesses in the last few weeks?
80% of my congregation. In
Wow.
other words, if there's out of 100 people, 20 of them have to get up and go to work tomorrow morning, or get to go to work.
Is that a primarily a result, you feel like, of the policies that have been put in place in Louisiana in the last few weeks and months?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because this is a petrochemical industry in Baton Rouge, similar to Houston. Okay, we have the largest petrochemical industry in America right here on the Mississippi River. So everybody that's quote unquote non-essential have been sent home, and they're waiting to draw unemployment, which takes weeks to bring in. And when it comes in, it's only about $248, which is a small portion of their check. And then the restaurant owners and the small business owners that waiters, waitresses, they're all sent home right now with no incomes.
So I know you mentioned that you said that a lot of your congregation, you said you're not a wealthy congregation. I mean,
yes.
a lot of your congregation maybe would be represented in those service jobs and places
blue collar workers, welders, pipe fitters, electricians. Okay. All of them are non-essential right now. How do you tell a man he's non-essential? What does it do to a man's morale? What does it do to him and his relationship with his spouse? What does it do to a woman who is told she's non-essential? That's ungodly. Number one, we're made in God's image and after his likeness. What does it do to a little girl who is going to be the first one in her family to graduate, but she can't graduate this year? She won't turn her tassel and throw her cap and wear a gown across the stage. What does that do? All because of a false narrative. And that false narrative is being unfolded every minute before our eyes.
So do your congregants agree with you about, I mean, put aside everybody else outside of the church, do your congregation, do they agree with your stance on this?
Oh, they do. They do. The people that come to church are not forced to come to church. They all share my values. They say, President Trump, please open our nation. They say to the other churches, please open your doors. They say to their employers, please put us back to work. How can you do this to us? We would rather take our risk with COVID-19, which has a 99.3% recovery rate. Some people don't even know they have the symptoms till they're past it. They would rather take their risk with COVID than they had lose their life's possessions and their everything that they've ever worked for. So they share my sentiments, and my people like me have convictions, not preferences. Neither the pressure of our friends, family, lawsuit, jail, nor death will stop us from doing our convictions.
So let's talk about jail and your arrest and everything. How many times have you been charged right now by, is it Louisiana state government, or who's actually charged you, and what does that look like?
They're currently, it's violation of the governor's emergency orders. and then that goes 26:4, some numbers. So those orders, every time I have a church service, I'm in violation of those government orders. So when I was arrested, it was for 6 counts. Now I have 9 counts. There are 3 warrants for my arrest right now. East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Department, East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Department, District Attorney, and the Central Police Department. So everywhere I go, I'm followed by 5 federal agents. If I go to the store, 5 people are following me at all times. They're looking for me to do something out of, that may be unlawful, that they can catch me. So, I'm proud of that, because every time they do that, there are God-fearing people in our city that are waking up to what's happening. This is no longer a free country whenever convicts are turned loose. A man was murdered today in New Orleans, 80 miles from here, because he was a heroin dealer and a murderer, but he was turned loose from jail and I was arrested.
So let's talk about. I mean, you have a family, right? And
yes, I have family. I have grandchildren.
So are you concerned for your family's sake? You say federal agents are following you. I mean, does it concern you that all these folks are out to get you, or?
It concerns me. However, I tried to pay the sheriffs to guard my home and my church because we have vandalism. My windows are being busted out on some of my property. I'm receiving death threats. So the sheriffs will not come out and respond, but they will answer my call. I was just informed today by a sheriff that a man who threatened my life was arrested. So that gave me hope. However, my men in my church are on 24/7 duty on 4-hour shifts. So right now there's about 8 men out on my parking lot on these 34 acres who are patrolling. And when something is fishy going on, then they call the sheriff. So we have a healthy fear. We're not cowards where we're going to stay behind our doors. We're not going to do that. And we go boldly into the night, as one poet said. But we're keeping our head while all about us are losing theirs and blaming it on us. And at the end of the day, we're giving people hope and saying, there may be something to this, Pastor, because the death toll is not adding up like they said it would. And I had the virus, someone said, and it wasn't as bad as what they said it was. And I never was admitted to the hospital. So we don't live in fear. We're checking people's temperatures before they come through our doors. We're checking people for weapons before they come through our doors.
You are checking. So you're checking temperatures before they come into the church.
That's correct.
Okay, so you are taking some precautions before people actually come into the church.
And that's with medical professionals, RNs in our church, and other security agents who are checking for weapons and profiling people. We have people come in from Oregon, and they're of a different persuasion in Oregon. They're not like people from the South. So we kind of screen those people and say, okay, you can come in and worship, and they tend to be all right people. They're protesters out on the curb and in the median. They have the freedom of speech just like we have the freedom to worship. So we don't persecute them, and we ask that those feelings are reciprocated.
So you mentioned a few things about folks in the congregation who are RNs, and they're obviously there and they're checking temperature, things like this, and you are taking some precautions. But as I look at the recent numbers from Louisiana, the officially reported numbers right now is something like 17,000 cases and 652 dead as of this moment. I mean, it sounds like you would question that. You don't really believe those numbers, or you're saying that maybe they're not quite accurate.
I'm going to tell you their inaccuracy. I know a woman an hour from here with a family of 9 She pulls up. They do not let her get out of her vehicle at the hospital. They test her for strep. She doesn't have strep. They test her for flu. She doesn't have flu. They say, you have COVID-19. She said, when did you test me? They said, we will not. You have COVID-19. Now, how many people are in your home? She says, well, 8. She says, okay, you and all 8 members have COVID-19 14 days. That is an evil narrative, but that is true. But it's going to backfire on them. Why? Because the death toll is not going to keep up with the people of numbers diagnosed. Now, that's what's happening in America. So how can you trust those numbers? Okay, that's what's happening. And that is not an isolated case. It's a questionnaire. Where have you been? Oh, you've been to church. Well, how do we know? This virus doesn't have a brain. It doesn't stop at the door of Walmart, where there are more people in Walmart than any of my services right now. And it comes into my sanctuary. You see the false narrative? Mm-hmm. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Yeah. So, so what you're saying is that a lot of people have this virus, and then they're not really being maybe tested for it, and then the numbers wouldn't be as bad if they were actually tested. If everybody had a cough or something.
Yeah. Yes, if they were actually tested, and then the people that have it, as far as I've been told by our medical professional staff, that coronavirus has been here a long time. This is just a new strain, 19, and the immune system of our physical anatomy will eventually beat it. And if that's the case, and that is the case, then Dr. Fauci will go down in history. Dr. Fauci will go down in history as a man who tried to cripple the greatest nation on earth and might have succeeded in doing that. I fear for America. I was optimistic 3 weeks ago. I preached, America's going to rebound from this. Keep hope alive. You can't keep a good man down. Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When we fall, we shall arise. America's overcome great obstacles. But now I have my doubts. If we stay down until April 30th and up into the summer like our governor wants, America may never rebound from this.
So let me ask you, if you were, I mean, on some level, you must understand that obviously public officials want to do something to stem the tide of, you look at New York, and whether it's a high rate of death or it's a low rate of death, as you say, obviously there are a lot of people dying. I mean, you acknowledge that. It's not like they're making up all these deaths that are happening. So if you were governor of Louisiana, and I think the governor's John Bel Edwards, correct? If you were governor, what would you do? Would you just say, life goes on, or would you put any restrictions in place?
I would say, number one, this is a virus. Evidently, it's deadly. It's dangerous. We have to keep our nation going. People go to work, go to church. We need hope in our state right now. Keep your social distancing. Don't shake hands with people. If you have symptoms, stay home, stay away from people. That's common sense. There's a death of common sense in America because our governing bodies know the Constitution of the United States. They couldn't be elected officials if they didn't. But if knowing the Constitution, why are you abandoning the Constitution of the United States and taking our rights from us? No governing body has the right to do what is being done right now. So what I would say is what Zachary Taylor said, the President of the United States, during the outbreak of yellow fever. He said, everybody go to church and let's bind together in prayer and beat this. He discouraged people going to work, but he encouraged people to go to places of worship. We're totally opposite in America now. Isaiah 5:20 says, woe unto them that call good evil and evil good, have set right for wrong and wrong for right. Now we've shut down the places of worship, and we've told people they're non-essential, and we have a stay-at-home order. Yet the stay-at-home order is so vague. The least restrictive means is anybody that's on that 4-lane highway behind me right now is in violation of the governor's orders. but they want to persecute the church. This is a persecution of the faith.
So you would basically say that the priorities are out of whack, that people maybe shouldn't go to work as much as they should be going to church, and if you're going to go anywhere, church is as safe a place as any place.
Deuteronomy 25:13, Jess, thou shalt not have false balances. Thou shalt not have divers weights. Thou shalt have a just balance. So in the Gospels, what does that mean? There was a woman caught in the act of adultery in John 8:1-12, thrown at Jesus' feet. Yet the false balance was the man was left in the bed. The woman they said, we're going to kill this woman, but we're going to leave the man alone. Well, Jesus says, no, we're not going to deal in false balances here. Had you have brought them both to me, they both deserve to die. But when you get me involved, I say, let he that is without sin cast the first stone. So the false balance here is we have one balance for retailers, where there are thousands of people in Costco and Sam's where there's a mosh pit fighting over a box of toilet paper right now. But the church can't have anybody assemble. You see the false balance? And if we would close everything down, then true conviction people like myself would go underground and do what we have to do. But don't for 1 second keep Planned Parenthood open and tell me to close. Don't keep the alcohol stores open and tell me to close. Don't keep the cannabis retailers open and tell me to close. That's the false narrative. Where have we gone in America when the Pilgrims fled the rule of King George, tyrannical rule at 2.5 miles per hour across the Atlantic, to come here for freedom of worship, where we now have to defend going to church? And yes, we are having to defend going to church. I've had to hire the greatest constitutional lawyers in America to help me defend my right to do that.
So who is on your legal defense team? I mean, who?
Yes, Judge Roy Moore, Montgomery, Alabama, who is one of the greatest constitutional attorneys alive today. Civil rights attorney Joseph Long, who has filed suit and is going to federal court, where they're not elected judges but appointed for lifetime judges, who will rule in our favor. Attorney Jeff Wittenbrink, who is also a constitutional attorney. All of these people have been in our services and are saying this is gross government overreach, and they see the least restrictive means. This is an attack on the church, and they're not even filing it as the least restrictive means argument. They're filing this as we're endowed by our Creator with these unalienable rights, and our rights are the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Our pursuit of happiness is going to church, and we are socially responsible, and we're socially distancing in our services.
So you believe that you will prevail if this gets to a federal judge's
Yes.
desk? And
yes, sir. We will go all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And according to our good friends at the Christian Law Association, the Gibbs, who I speak with nearly on a day-to-day basis, there are 5 things that protect us, and those 5 things define a conviction. And what is? The pressure of my friends, the pressure of my family is not going to stop us from congregating. The threat of a lawsuit, which we already have, jail, which we've already done, and the final test is death. Are we willing to die for our rights to assemble? And we are. We have proved that. And people are willing to die for a lot of things today. I talk with atheists today who said, we don't agree with your convictions or your religion, but we swore an oath to uphold, protect the Constitution, and we would die for you and your rights to assemble. I was proud of that. That gives me hope. My grandfather spent 37 months as a prisoner of war in Korean War conflict, and he fought for the liberties that I have. And I would have to repent to him today if I stopped assembling whenever he fought against tyrannical socialist governments like are creeping into America's borders today. who are trying to take our rights from us slowly but surely, Jess.
So, Pastor, you mentioned family, friends, and convictions. Do you have anyone in your family that is saying, hey, why don't you just listen to the governor's order? I mean, is there anyone close to
I
you like that?
I have someone in my family, an uncle who wants to change his last name. He says, I'm so ashamed of what you're doing. He says, I'm so appalled at how you're defying. The word is not defy anyway. There are no orders. There are no laws that we're breaking. The First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, Congress shall make no laws.
So how do you feel? How do you feel about that when somebody close in your family like that says, "Hey, I want to change my last name"? I'm that,
It lets me know the failed public school system of America in the past 3 decades. It lets us to realize just how ignorant we are and oblivious we are as to our constitutional rights. It makes me say our government should fear us, not us fear our government. However, people are literally losing their collective minds and are afraid of this virus, and they're afraid of their government when it should be vice versa. And there are friends of the faith, of our same faith. The largest oneness organization in the world, Pentecostal organization, has written a 4-point disclaimer with my name and sent it to every major news outlet in America, calling me by name, saying I have no credentials with them. I do not represent their beliefs or their values. My views are not their views. I wear that as a badge of honor because Jesus Christ also was hated by the religious elites. In fact, it was they that said, turn Barabbas, the murderer, loose and crucify the Son of God. So how does that make me feel? I'm both deeply saddened, but on the other hand, I have righteous pride in that I'm numbered with a few people in the 21st century who are in America being persecuted for their beliefs.
So their research on the virus has pointed out, to some extent, I don't think that the research is completely finished, but they're researching how contagious the virus is prior to symptoms being shown. And according to what some researchers are saying, the virus may be contagious for days before initial symptoms are shown. So even though you're checking temperature and doing some of these things in the church, does it not concern you that there may be people gathering who have this and maybe are unknowingly spreading it to other congregants?
Well, my concern there is I tell at the beginning of every service and our ushers at the door, if you're from the same house, you can touch and sit on the same pew. If you're from a different home, do not touch, shake hands. This is how we shake hands now. So before I lay hands and pray for anyone, or before I shake anyone's hands who have a deep conviction, maybe they're a different nationality or different race, it's insulting to them for me not to shake their hands. So I shake their hand, I immediately disinfect with hand sanitizer, and I go on to the next person of our church. So what I say to those people who say, yes, you can be asymptomatic and not have symptoms, it's no different with the flu or malaria or any other thing that is highly contagious. And we've been using common sense practices for years. I learned in pre-K to wash my hands and not wipe my nose and touch somebody or touch a doorknob. I learned that early on, but our government is so simple right now. They're telling everybody, wash your hands for 20 seconds. Have you tried to run your hands underwater for 20 seconds? It's impossible. You can't do that.
So have you had anybody in the congregation test positive for coronavirus at any point?
I've had many people test, however, none have tested positive as of yet. We expect people to test positive. We're a large congregation. But at the same coin, I know people that test and then they quarantine. The test doesn't come back for 10 days and their quarantine was only 7 days. They came back positive on day 10. Their quarantine's already over and they're ready to go back into public life.
So
So
if you have people in the church that test positive, how are you going to address it? Are you going to let all the congregants know, or are you going to kind of say,
uh,
"Hey, we've had so many people test positive"?
yeah, no, what I say to that person is obey the medical professionals' recommendations, which is the quarantine. And I do live stream my services right now. We typically do not, because live streaming promotes church absenteeism.
Right.
So
So
I'm trying to get
if you
people
have folks that test positive, you're not going to tell the whole congregation. You'll deal with it with those individuals.
with those individuals because I don't want them to be excluded like they're lepers when they do come back. And and if you remember in the late '80s, there was the AIDS scare. We wouldn't touch doorknobs. We wouldn't go to public bathrooms. We were in fear and terror. Well, all that kind of faded away, and it can only be transmitted through blood, sexual contact, what have you. COVID is so young. COVID-19 is so young right now. We don't know what to believe. No two doctors can agree. I've got medical professionals in my congregation that don't agree. Oh, it's this, it's that. So it's so young right now, but this Bible has been around a long time, and it commands us. When I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. It commands us. If the earthly house of this tabernacle be dissolved, we have a building of God not made with hands eternal in the heavens. It says to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. So perfect love casts out all fear. We don't live in fear of
So
contract.
do folks who are in the congregation though? I mean, if somebody's
Yes.
going there and they are, they're trying to do the very best they can, obviously, and continue to attend services. And as you said, people are making a choice. But if
Yes.
you have people that are testing positive, don't you think the rest of the congregation would want to know at least that someone has tested positive, or we've had some
Uh,
people?
I would think they would want to know. And as I have stated in every service, somebody's going to get the virus. You're going to get the virus. I've stated that in every service. And and these are educated people. They're smart people. Some are professors in colleges, and some are politicians, some attorneys, some blue collar workers, some people with not very much education. Everybody has to make their choice at the end of the day. And their choice is, we don't have a job to go to. We have no more money to go to the retailers. Please let us go to church and at least have some hope. You can live 40 days without food, 7 days without water, 19 minutes without air. You can't live 1 second without hope. And the church is the last hope for America.
So a lot of folks would say, I think, maybe question the responsibility of a leader, right, a pastor, in dealing with a lot of people and saying,
Yes.
okay, you've got a few people that maybe test positive, and you're not going to tell the rest of the congregation.
Mhm.
But then also you have 600 kids, I think you said, that come to church, right? And you're
Yeah,
busting them
yeah,
in, and
yeah.
no doubt you're feeding them and doing some wonderful things with these kids. But is there not a concern that maybe the kids get sick, they go back home to their, parents, grandparents, older folks, and some of those people that are a little bit more vulnerable, and then maybe, unintentionally the virus spreads through the church and ends up taking the lives of other vulnerable people, and
What
is that
what
a
I what
concern?
I what I say to that is Hebrews 11. Uh, this virus is unseen; it's invisible. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Our faith is so strong that we're not going to live in the narrative of the what ifs, or because more people were killed in car crashes today across America than were killed by COVID-19. So again, this is such a false narrative that is being pushed by the media terrorists. Media terrorists. Look how they've twisted the things that I say. Look how they've made me to be a Paul Pot and a Joseph Stalin. I've been called all kinds of things by the media in the past 2 weeks. Very disrespectful things. At the same coin, they go out and they buy food at these retailers. Job 23:12, Job said, I have esteemed the words of thy mouth more than my necessary food. I'll tell you what our church and our faith is to my people. It's more than our necessary food. There's three parts to you and I, Jess: body, soul, and spirit. The hospital can take care of this body, but only Jesus Christ can take care of the soul and spirit. So if they go home, children are carriers, but they're not affected by this virus from what we're being told today. That may change tomorrow. I was told yesterday, do not use hand sanitizer because it makes you vulnerable to the virus. And then another medical professional told me today, yes, use hand sanitizer, not soap and water. We don't know what to believe anymore. But no, we are not going to live in fear and intimidation. We are not slaves to fear, because our forefathers, they were sewn asunder. They were drawn and quartered. Their bodies were dipped in creosote and nailed to crosses and burned at the stake to light Nero. The same Christian brothers of ours who are telling us, Romans 13:1, you have to be subject to the governing body. That is not a civil government. If that were a civil government that he was writing about in Romans 13, then my missionaries in communist China and Islamic Pakistan and Saudi Arabia would not be able to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. That Romans 13 narrative is written to the church government. The members and the sheep are to be in subjection to the shepherd. So there's a lot of misunderstanding concerning the word of God, a lot of misunderstanding concerning this virus. And I beg, if I could take off this suit and put on beggar's clothes, I would beg America's Christian leaders, please open your doors, practice social distancing, and open the doors to the church, and this nation will come back again. But if we don't, our worst is yet to come.
So why do you think so few pastors are taking the step of being arrested, opening the church, and again, some would say, subjecting their whole congregation to the spread of the virus? Why are so few people doing that, and you and a few others around the country are willing to do it, but very few are at this point?
Yes, I really don't have that answer. I've been in the battle so long now defending our rights. I can't speak. Every man has to hear from God for his congregation. Hebrews 13:17, he has to give an account for the souls of his congregation. Just like a minister presents a bride to the bridegroom at a wedding, the pastor of the church is going to present his, has to hear from God. If he's heard from God to live stream, I respect him. Now, it's not being reciprocated to me that I've heard from God, and I believe that I have, or I would not be doing what I'm doing. And I'll tell you how I know I've heard from God, because we have baptisms every day now. There are people that are coming in from across the country every day just to be around courage and strong faith to say, pray for us. I have church members from other people's churches in our city that are saying, we want to come. I say, you get that clearance from your pastor first. You don't give me an offering. You don't pay tithe to me. You owe that to your man of God. So I'm not showboating, sheep stealing, or taking money from anybody else's saints. However, there are people, religious leaders, that are openly attacking me right now, and a true Christian brother should never do that, Jess.
So in terms of just a personal impact, let's say that a parishioner, congregant comes to you and says, hey, pastor, my grandmother, my grandfather, my mom, my dad just died from this. They were at your services. I mean, how would you respond to that situation? Because, I mean, it seems like from the rising death toll in your area of Louisiana, that's possible that'll happen. So what will you say to somebody who's in that situation?
Well, first, we'll take the case at hand. We'll pray for them. We'll go through with the funeral process. We'll do what our God-given duties are as a man of God. But nobody can prove, if you've been anywhere outside of your home, you could have contracted it. I have greater safety measures in my congregation than they have at the gas station, which is filthy. Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club, those places are filthy right now. I'm talking about the servile workers have been laid off. There are people cleaning who are doing terrible jobs of cleaning. So number one, there's no way to prove that you got it in my congregation, number one. And you would have a hard time proving that. Not that I'm trying to shirk any responsibility, but I would say to anybody that's afraid this virus is attracted to fear, don't come out and worship until this is over. And don't come out to church until this is over. And people are respecting that. So
what if you get the virus? Are you concerned about your own personal safety with this? I mean, you mentioned using hand sanitizer. You are taking some measures, so you're obviously not trying to get it. It doesn't sound like yourself.
No, I'm not trying to get it. We believe the science, but we have more faith in God than science. If I get it, I have a strong immune system. I preached on 6 of our 7 continents in the world. I've laid hands on lepers, highly contagious diseases, people with typhoid, different kind of diseases. We believe that the Bible tells us to lay hands on the sick and they shall recover. That's biblical truth, Mark 16:16. So again, we have no fear. And Jesus told us, fear not he which can kill the body, but fear them which can kill the body and the soul and cast into hell fire. I'm more afraid of that. I'm more afraid of not living like a free man and living up to the first century church of the book of Acts, who were beheaded. St. Paul was beheaded. Peter was crucified on an upside down cross. Jude had his brains clubbed out. So are they better than me? Am I better than them? I'm not better than them. So again, I refuse to live in fear of this virus, and all Americans need to get their courage back. Yep.
Well, I was going to ask you, so do you have any friends in the Louisiana legislature that agree with you, or local officials, or are you just kind of silent?
I do. State Representative Woody Jenkins agrees with me. Representative Dan Clater agrees with me. They are not vocal. Why are they not vocal? Because people they feel are really under it. They're bewitched right now with this fear. They feel that a spell has been cast on them, like it's the occult. People are so afraid of this virus because of the narrative that's come down from Dr. Fauci. And I have a hunch that President Trump wants this thing to open up and get back to normalcy, and because he has been lied to by the medical professionals. Nothing is added up. So yes, I have people in high positions. I speak to people in our nation's capital on a day-to-day basis who said, we're rooting for you, we're in your corner. We can't give our names because of fear of our jobs.
So are there any members of Congress or the federal legislature that are in agreement with you, that have said,
yes,
hey,
there are.
Pastor?
Yes, they are. They're saying we're with you. Continue. Don't worry about the officials who have arrested you. And Governor John Bel Edwards, who has called you by name on CNN for 5 minutes, he said, we're going to shut you down. We're going to do something to close him down. Just don't worry about that. You keep practicing your First Amendment rights, and you keep putting hope into the hearts of people, because we see this for what it is. And this is okay, you know what it is. I want to know why more constitutional attorneys and why more red-blooded Americans are not up in arms right now and saying, give us our nation back. Give us our nation back.
Pastor, have you spoken to Governor Edwards since all this began at all?
In person, no. Would I be willing to? Yes. He has sent many representatives out who have sat here at my desk and asked me to stop and said, please stop. And
so when Governor Edwards sends someone to meet with you, and they're sitting in the position that myself, I guess, or any viewer is sitting in, any listener, what do they say to you? What are they asking you?
They're asking me to stop assembling. They used to come into my building. Now they will not come into my building because it's a hot spot, contaminated. How does that make my congregation feel when the news media won't come across my threshold and government officials, the sheriff, will not even come across my threshold? What does that say to people of different nationalities into my church. Who are they better than me? Are they? What's going on? So that's I could be mean and say that's a double-barreled hypocrite is what that is. Because if you'll go into the governor's mansion and not come into my church, something's the matter with you.
What would you say to Governor Edwards? I mean, if he were watching this or listening to this, I don't know, maybe he will catch wind of this or one of your other interviews. But if he was, what would you want to say to him directly?
I would want to say, give us our state back. Stop taking from us our rights to assemble. Stop taking from us our freedom of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We would rather take our risk with COVID-19, which we're finding out every day is a hoax on the narrative. 150,000 babies were murdered yesterday, Governor, in abortion clinics. 11,000 people have died of COVID-19. This isn't about death. This isn't about a virus. This is about a socialistic government taking from us our freedoms as God-fearing Americans. That's what I would say to him and any other politician that is overreaching their rights as a constitutional upholder of the law.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to folks that are listening or watching this, Pastor?
Yes, I would like to say, number one, don't believe everything you see in the fake news about us. We're not a cult. We rescue people from suicide. We clothe people. We feed people. We do what Jesus Christ would be doing today. Jesus said, which of these was his neighbor, do you think? The man who had compassion on them. Our federal government, I say to America, our federal government and our state government is failing our schools and my children in our city who have no meals right now. They provide meals at their schools, but there's no transportation to the schools. They have no transportation. How are they going to get the food? You know how? I'm getting on my buses, and my people who are laid off are getting on their buses, and I'm paying them to go feed our children right now. The government is failing, and the government will continue to fail. It's time for the church to be the church, and it's time for America to become Americans again.
Pastor Spell, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jess. God bless you, and God bless America.
And that was Pastor Tony Spell of the Life Tabernacle Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I want to thank you for joining me on what I hope is the first of many interesting conversations here on this podcast and web show. If you'd want to leave a comment on the Facebook or some other place, please do so. I will read all of them. If you have an interest in sponsoring the show, please send an email to jessfieldsshow@gmail.com. Thank you very much and have a great day.